Thanks for joining us. And over the next 20 minutes, I'd just like to focus on a number of issues that we have observed in the retail financial services sector, which are probably best described as inhibitors to innovation. Share with you a case study of an organization we've worked with who have addressed some of those issues in a quite unusual and innovative way. And give you some tips that we'd like to share with you based on our experience of working in this sector, which might help accelerate innovation in your own organizations. And as Erica said, we'll take questions at the end. So if there are any things that, any particular questions that you have, please save them till then. So let's look, the agenda that we're going to cover, as I mentioned, we'll talk about why lean and mean. We've used that expression really to focus on what we believe is one of the root causes of problems in digital innovation not meeting expectations, and that is a failure to be really consistent with the objectives of Agile as they were set out some 16 years ago. And then we'll look at a case study and give you our tips. So let's look at those factors that we think are impacting innovation in the financial services sector. So first of all, we'll look at the obvious one is around disruption. It's in all of the papers. There are stories every week about organizations who are embarking on changing the way that each sector operates, not just financial services. So the emergence of things like Airbnb and Uber in those sectors, and in the financial services industry, things like peer-to-peer lending, competition, competitors coming not just through disruption, but obviously competitors from a traditional sense, how your customers are behaving, and the fact that customers have got choices to make about where they're going to get the financial services. And it's becoming much broader than perhaps just core financial services products. And then you've got compliance, which is the ever-present risk issue, which financial services companies have to grapple with on a day-to-day basis. So here's some data that kind of backs up the issues that the sector faces around disruption. Consumer financial services and insurance quite high up in the list of sectors that are experiencing disruption and find this to be a significant factor. On the competition side, you've got the new competitors coming to the market, peer-to-peer lending, the things that are clearly going to develop around stuff like blockchain, are going to produce all sorts of competitive challenges for financial services organizations, which mean you're going to have to respond quickly. You're going to have to respond in more innovative ways in order to stay ahead in the markets that you operate in. Customers are becoming much more tech savvy, so they are making choices about how they want to engage with financial services companies based on the tech that they can get access to. They're getting much more comfortable with things like smartphone devices and tablets, and have an expectation that they can interact in a way that suits them as individuals through those devices. And then you've got compliance, because compliance has always been there. It's becoming even more of an issue, I think, for companies who are trying to exploit technology to the full. And it's going to be one of those factors that will continually be seen as something that will be holding us back from being a bit innovative. So when we look at the specifics around digital solution development, there are a number of factors that we see are slowing organizations down. First of all, the traditional models, and I use the word traditional really just referring to the way that Agile is being used in a lot of instances, is not really helping us. We've got process inefficiencies, so the actual way in which organizations engage with development is not always going to be producing the results that we want to see. Lack of customer engagement relates really to, again, the way that traditional development models engage with customers. Excuse me, I apologize for this. We seem to have somebody interrupting us. So that was the lack of customer engagement. We had actually one of our customers engaging with us then. And then finally, organizational structures. So it's fair to say that the legacy that financial services companies have in the way that they're organized doesn't really help us in being innovative because of the traditional way that they're structured and managed. So we as an organization really don't like waste. It's one of the things that is constantly in our minds, and one of the big drivers behind the adoption of the Ultra Agile approach that 3 Weeks uses. There's a whole stack of data to back this up. 2 reports that we picked up on, the Standish report, which reckons that between 65 and 75% of all software that's written is never actually used. And this report that was done by the US Department of Defense that reckoned that they were wasting something like $9 billion worth of their budget each year on unnecessary software development or systems that weren't actually used. So let's return to the original Agile Manifesto and see if we can actually pull out some things that could help us improve that situation. So first of all, it's really about making sure that whenever we engage in an Agile project, we're developing software straight away. We're not documenting it. We're not producing reams of documents on requirements. We're actually building stuff and testing it with customers and end users as quickly as possible. The second aspect of Agile is around people, and it's around interacting with people and working out what it is they're doing rather than obsessing with processes. So the actual engagement with customers and end users is a vitally important ingredient here. Being able to adapt to change rather than analyzing where we've got to and how we've got there. So one of the things that we've noticed through engagement on over 150 projects is when we engage with end users and actually start working with them, it inevitably means that we get taken in a number of different directions, which we wouldn't necessarily have been able to have predicted at the outset, and we've got to be prepared for that. And then finally, collaborating rather than getting involved in contract negotiations. So contracts are necessary at some stage for sure, but actually if you can spend the time working in a collaborative way, you will accelerate the way in which you can innovate. A traditional sort of MVP model looks something like this. So a minimum viable product is what we're trying to produce normally, or a prototype. And that means working through a thin slice of the functions and features of a product in order to understand how customers and end users are using it. So that's really shown on the right-hand side of this graphic. So working out, what is it that's feasible? What is it that then is going to be of value to a customer and they will want to use it? And then what is the thing or things that are really going to delight them when they actually start using it on a continuing basis? So the traditional IT model, of course, is based on this. You get your big idea, that results in some big thinking and a lot of head scratching around use cases and scenarios and gathering user requirements. And then you get into the big program, which is about, a significant amount of time thought being devoted to the design before you even get into development and getting it back to the customer. So in this process, typically 12 to 24 months, there are lots and lots of areas of risk here, and there are lots of ways in which the original ideas and principles can be lost. The approach that we adopt in a sort of an ultra agile environment is very, very different. So we're working in a much more compressed period of time, but we're working with users from day one. So a typical definition workshop might be only an hour or an hour and a half of working with the business stakeholders to clearly define what is the problem we're trying to fix, what's the one thing we're trying to fix, where are the customers that we can engage with from day one, and if we can come up with a sentence that demonstrates that we have produced the outcome that they were expecting, what would that sentence be, with a simple yes or no answer. And then we get into the work, and actually the acid test for us is, can we engage with those customers and end users within 24 hours of taking the brief, because if we can do that, we should be able to start producing useful outcomes within days rather than weeks. So this approach is very focused around outcomes. It's ultra rapid, so producing deliverables within 3 weeks or less, and also making sure that we've got this end user engagement from day one. Absolutely critical for ensuring that we are getting, meaningful outputs from projects. The results of this are typically 2 to 4 times more capital efficient than traditional projects, and significantly less risky, because we're only ever developing things that we know customers actually are going to use and want and are of value to them. And working in much shorter timescales. So even when we're producing prototypes and MVPs, adopting this ultra agile approach can produce outcomes in a significantly shorter period of time, and we'll talk about that in the case study in just a moment. And by far and away, I think one of the biggest benefits is the user experience. So by engaging users in this process, the expectations that are set around how this product or service is going to get used at the end is scaled up significantly. And that means that you're going to get a really, really positive response when it's shared with customers at the end. So how do we do this? Let me just give you a short example of a financial services company we worked with recently. So their problem was they were trying to find ways to engage with customers that did not directly involve a sale of their products. So in their innovation team, they came up with the idea of, how about we set up a portal that is going to enable customers to set up their own business. So what are the services that they would want to do for that? They'd need legal services, they'd need web, they'd need advertising, marketing, they'd need help around recruitment. So we set about creating basically a portal for them to be able to offer these services to end customers. To test this, they didn't really want to disclose their name. So they wanted to make sure that this was done as a discrete activity, but they needed to have tangible results to share with their management team. So what we did was to basically white label this portal product and ring-fenced it so that it wasn't actually being developed as part of the traditional IT department work or work within the innovation team within the client. It was being done outside in a discrete way. We actually then engaged a group of potential customers. We shared with them the concept. We asked them how they would want to use this product and what their expectations were in terms of charging, etc. So within 3 weeks, we actually had the evidence and we had a working prototype to prove that this kind of approach would have some value, even if it wasn't branded. So then when you start layering on the brand of the financial services company that wanted to do this, our expectation was that we'd get an exceptionally higher take-up of customers. And in fact, that is probably going to be the case based on the evidence we've gathered so far. So this is a really good example of how, with a simple idea and actually tackling it as a ring-fenced activity, you can start producing evidence of the value that it's going to deliver back to the organization very, very rapidly. So here are 5 tips for how we think the retail financial services sector can accelerate some of their own innovation activity and really become lean and mean. First of all, you've got to have a digital-first strategy. There needs to be a source of purpose behind what it is you're doing. And if people understand that, you can start to start getting a lot more cohesion and a lot more collective involvement in how you're going to deliver that digital strategy. Secondly, it's about the culture. So one thing which is obvious to us from the 150 odd projects that we've done is that the culture within financial services organizations does not necessarily support this kind of innovative approach. So you have to incubate it in a way that allows it to grow in one area so that people can begin to get on board and put it into their own context. And it's really about showing by doing. So by actually producing the kinds of results that I've just talked about in that case study, people within the organization begin to think, hang on a second, this stuff really works. And it starts getting a bit of a buzz, and then you begin to see a lot more interest in being part of this change rather than sitting on the fence and waiting to see what happens. Thirdly, there are new roles and new skill sets that are required to work in this environment. So it's not always practical to ask your own team to start doing this stuff if they don't have the skills and competencies to do it. So we'd recommend that you need to first of all, you need to define what that new profile is, and then screen, upskill or hire people to fill those roles. Then we come to the issue of infrastructure. So again, one of the common factors that we've seen that seem to be holding organizations back around innovation is their own infrastructure, both IT and organizational. So there is a need here to think in terms of how we can exploit the kind of cloud infrastructure that's being offered by people like Google, AWS, and Azure to make that an underpinning part of the strategy. And it really does make a big difference if you've got the right infrastructure in place. You can really drive some of this ultra agile development activity much, much faster. And then finally, measuring the outcomes. So it's very easy to get caught up in the excitement and the innovative nature of the work that goes on in digital. But if you're not actually measuring the outcomes and being able to show a before and after measurement, it's very difficult for people to really understand what success really means. So again, we would urge you to think in terms of what are the things that we can measure that are meaningful to our organization to show the difference that we're able to make in very short periods of time. So look, this has been a very short session deliberately. We wanted to really just sort of seed some ideas and perhaps share with you some of our insights around this. If you'd like to know more about how you can become ultra agile, please do contact us, either directly through my email address, which is paul@3weeks.com.au, or through our website and LinkedIn pages. And we'd be delighted to have any questions from you if there are any right now. Thank you.
We've received one question here from Justin, and the question is, what is the difference between traditional skill sets and those of an ultra agile team?
Okay, so just, I mean, it's a really big question, Justin, but I think that the key differences that we've seen are that traditional IT tends to very compartmentalize roles and responsibilities, you know, for good reason. But in the digital domain, and particularly in ultra agile, we found that there needs to be a concentration of skills, particularly when it comes to development activity and a consultant role. So typically in a 3 weeks team, we would have one consultant and 2 developers. The consultant would be somebody who is a mix of program manager, product manager, business analyst, and QA. So they would have a really good grounding in at least 2 or 3 of those disciplines in order to perform the role, because they're going to be interacting with end users and customers as well as the business. And then the developers would typically be full stack developers, so people who can work on the front end and the back end and the middle in order to actually deliver the working products. Those individuals are also need to be very, very strong communicators. They need to be people who are very comfortable in front of end users and customers, because they are going to be gathering first-hand information about the products and services that they're delivering.
Okay, thank you. And there's another question here that's kind of related to this, and it goes, how do you manage conventional teams alongside ultra agile teams?
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
How do you manage conventional teams alongside the Ultra Agile?
Yeah, so I think this is one of these questions which is very specific to individual organizations. One of the things that we've observed, though, is that taking a group of people and keeping them in a kind of an incubator or a ring-fenced environment for a short period of time is a good way of developing competence. But at some point, they need to become part of the whole. So there are perhaps a number of ways you can do that. You can employ external organizations such as 3 weeks to be that external resource, or you can train up a group of people in an incubator environment. But in the end, you've got to kind of have a more cohesive structure where the digital capability within your business becomes part of the whole rather than it sitting on a platform outside.
Okay. Thank you, Paul, and thank you everyone for joining us on our webinar for financial services about overcoming innovation challenges. We will be putting this recording up and we will send you the link for it. Thank you very much once again, and we hope to be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica.